Hi, hey, hello. I thought I would go over all of the books that I read in quarter three of 2024, so July, August, and September, and pick out my favorites, my most disappointing. Just give us a little recap of what those months looked like reading wise. I have a feeling some of my all time favorite books of this year were read in those 3 months, but I guess we shall find out. Okay, so I'm going to be using StoryGraph because it's just my favorite book format, book tracking platform. If you are a fan of data and charts and just organization and for it to give you, like details of what you've been reading, I think StoryGraph is the best out there so far. July, August, September. First, let's see how many books I read. 9 books in July, 8 books in August, and 11 books in September. So if I do the math right, 28 books, 28 books in those 3 months. Not bad. My top 2 books of the month have to be Time is a Mother by Ocean Vuong, which is a collection of poems. First anything I've read by this author, and I've been meaning to get my hands on his other poetry collections, but I haven't yet. I do have this one as a physical book, but I lent it to one of my best friends, so I don't have it here to show you. But I loved this book. I read it all in one sitting and I underlined the hell out of it. I think I underlined more than didn't. That makes sense. Like more of the book is underlined than isn't. And that just goes to speak to how beautiful the writing of this author is. He has such a gorgeous, unique way with words, and his craft when it comes to being able to puzzle together these words into such beautiful sentences and beautiful poems. They touched me. I was crying with some of them. It's one of those books that I think I will reread over and over again, and I cannot wait to get my hands on Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. I own it as an ebook, and I've been tempted to just sit down and read it because I know I can read it all in one day and I will absolutely devour it and love it. But part of me just really wants to have it as a physical book. There's just something so special and raw about sitting down with a physical book and underlining lines in it that I just don't think can quite get across with an ebook, and definitely not with an audiobook, sadly. And I say that as someone who struggles to get through my physical books. But when it comes to poetry, I think you need to hold the physical book and be able to underline the physical pages, it just adds something to it, to the experience. And my other favorite book of the month has to be Jade War, which is the sequel in the Greenbone saga, second book of the trilogy. I end up liking this one even more than the first book, surprisingly. I grew more emotionally attached to the characters, and I shed quite a few tears, to say the least. And then my most disappointing books of this month have to be The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. I had such high hopes, especially after having read the Shadow and Bone trilogy and Six of Crows and some of her little novellas as well. I never read The King of Scars or Rule of Wolves, whatever that duology is called, but I did love Six of Crows and Shadow and Bone. I really like those as well. And The Familiar, I just had such high expectations for it, and it felt so flat. I did not care for the characters. I did not care for the plot. I didn't think it was cohesive or just well thought out, and the implementation of Spanish into it really threw me off. I think the author really focused on trying to make it as historically accurate to the time that it's set in Spain, but I don't understand why, because it's fantasy. There's magic, and it's very much a fantasy, so it doesn't have to be super historically accurate. It's not historical fiction. It's fantasy with historical fiction, I guess, but I think when you're adding fantasy aspects to it, I would have hoped that it would focus more on the magic and the plot and the character development, and not as much on the details about the history parts of it, because they didn't really add anything to the story, at least in my opinion. So yeah, very disappointed in that book. And I think I have to give a little shout out to Things You May Find Hidden in My Ear, Poems from Gaza. I also love this book, and it's hard to say you love it. Like, yes, I did. It was beautifully written, and I think it's a very important read, and these poems were heartbreaking and very touching and felt very important and just hold a lot of weight for the time that we're living in right now. So I would definitely recommend checking those poems out. I think that's it for the month of July. Moving on to August, I managed to read 8 books. Let's just do one and one because there's only 8 books. Favorite has to be A Master of Jinn. I've spoken about this book so many times. I'm not going to bore you to death again, but please go ahead and read A Master of Jinn. So freaking good. Fantasy, mystery, historical fiction, steampunk, sapphics, a cute cat. What else do I have to say? And my least favorite book of the month has to be Can't Spell Treason Without T. I don't think I have anything nice to say about this book, and my mother did always say that if you have nothing nice to say, then say nothing at all. So let's leave it at that. Incredibly disappointing. Especially because I kept getting compared to Legends and Lattes, and it's just nowhere near Legends and Lattes. And finally, we have September, in which I somehow read 11 books. I say that with a grain of salt. I think there were a lot of little short novellas in here. But my favorite book, hands down, from September has to be The Shadow of the Gods. I did a reading vlog for it, so I'll link it down below. It's by far one of the best books I've read this year, and one of the best high fantasy books I've read in a really, really long time. I loved the world. I loved the atmosphere. The world building was so... it was so present and dark and gory and whimsical. It's inspired in Norse mythology. The monsters are huge, and I've said that so many times, but I think it really added to the whole atmosphere and just making them feel so much more powerful and godlike, and giving them just so much more presence in the story simply due to their size and how scary that made them. The magic in this world was really, really cool. I really enjoyed our 3 main characters too, more than the other one, but I think she might grow on me in the second book. We shall see. I will for sure be buying the second and the third one so I can have the little collection. And my most disappointing book of this month has to go to Cultish, The Language of Fanatism. This is a nonfiction, and I don't really have much to say about it either. It was just not nearly as good as the first book that I read by the author. I'll have it up on the screen. That one I do very highly recommend. It's an introduction to linguistics, specifically with the English language, only with the English language, a feminist take on the English language. And I was excited to read more of the author's books because she has 2 other nonfictions. And so I went ahead and picked up Cultish and regretted it. I struggled to get through it. Yeah, it just wasn't what I was expecting. And maybe it's my bad. I've never really been a big fan, or just never really been interested in the whole concept of cults. And so I was hoping it would focus more on like the language of fanatism, and it didn't. So I don't know. It was very mid, and I just wouldn't pick up any more of her work. I've also heard her most recent book is very clickbaity and catfishy when it comes to the way it's been labeled as a nonfiction, but it's kind of more a memoir disguised as a nonfiction, and I'm just not interested enough. So yeah, out of the 28 books that I read, those were my favorites and my least favorites. If I had to pick the best book, that was 3 months. No, I can't do that. Oh god, I'm gonna struggle so much at the end of the year because I'm planning to tier rank all of the books and then somehow pick my best book of 2024. And if you know me at all, I struggle so much with choosing anything, making decisions. Little ones, like little things. I'm the wrong person to ask, what are we having for dinner tonight? I am the wrong person. I know it's a huge pet peeve for a lot of people. It's one of my own pet peeves. I fall under it. I am aware of the fact that this is a very irritating quality of mine. And I'm trying to work on it, but I'm going to struggle so much in picking my best book of 2024 if I can't even pick my best book of those 3 months. Shadow of the Gods and Jade War were the ones that made me cry. So it might be between those two. So let's go ahead and leave it at that. I hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you are. If you've made it all the way to the end of the video, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video.